After losing my memory and finding out that I was pregnant, I angrily went to the door of a certain irresponsible boss. "Why don't you take responsibility for me and my child?" The aloof alpha boss was stunned, and it took him a long time to come back to his senses. "You stay here, I will be responsible." Just when I was feeling smug about using my child to blackmail a big guy who seemed easy to bully and was able to get free food and drinks at his house, my good friend came to visit me. "My poor baby, so you failed in your escape and were caught by that paranoid lunatic?" I. 01. I'm a low-class Omega living in the ghetto. I accidentally lost my memory half a month ago and could only earn a living by working as a fighter in an underground boxing ring. Because I had been feeling dizzy and vomiting water for several days, I went to the hospital for a checkup and spent a lot of money. A few days later, I received a call from the hospital asking me to go there. The doctor pushed the report in front of me. "The results are out. Congratulations, you are pregnant." Although I know that I am a marked Omega, I like living alone and am used to being alone. I had no interest in who marked my alpha, and I never thought that I would have an unexpected cub before losing my memory. The doctor pushed up his glasses and asked me as a matter of routine, "Have you done any strenuous exercise in the past 2 months?" I felt a little guilty when asked, "Does having 7 or 8 fights in the boxing ring count?" The doctor who was taking notes was caught off guard. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the doctor immediately became serious. "Where's your alpha? You let your pregnant Omega fight outside. Do you think the Omega Protection Ordinance is just a decoration?" The doctor prescribed me a lot of pregnancy-preserving medicine. As the balance in my bank account gradually disappeared, I cursed a certain irresponsible scumbag 100 times in my heart. After leaving the hospital, I pulled a gold-stamped business card from my shirt pocket and held it up to the light. On the front of the business card is the name of Dylan, a big shot in the Beijing Circle, while on the back is a string of fluent handwritten numbers and a trembling cursive word, "Love," at the end. It has the scent of Alpha's aggressive pheromone. Just a little bit of pheromone can easily relieve my discomfort during pregnancy. This is what I held tightly in my hand before I lost my memory. It was also the only thought I had during my memory loss. It is also very likely that this is the father of the baby in my belly. Dylan's reputation is very famous in Beijing circles. Even though I live in the slums, I can hear a thing or two about him. It is said that he is unkind, cold, and abstinent, and there is no gossip about him at all. But looking at the child on the ultrasound report and the pitiful balance in my savings, I hesitated for a long time and finally made the call. The call was connected quickly, but the person on the other end didn't speak immediately. When I thought the other party had simply slipped his hand and connected the call, I heard his slightly restrained breathing. I asked nervously, "Is that Mr. Dylan?" The voice on the other end was hoarse, but surprisingly pleasant. "It's me. There is something I want to tell you." I spoke quickly, afraid that he would think it was a scam and hang up the phone. "I'm pregnant. It could be yours. Take a look. If you have time, maybe we can sit down and talk." The voice on the other end was silent for longer this time. After a long while, I heard the sound of someone putting out a cigarette. "Where are you now?" I glanced at the roadside and reported a well-known club. Dylan's voice was as light as before. "Stay there, I'll come get you." The phone beeped, and the call was hung up. Dylan seemed much easier to talk to than expected. Actually, at the beginning I went to Dylan just to ask for some money for raising the cub, and it would be even better if he could pay for its nutrition. I stroked the disobedient baby in my belly and thought, but it's rare to meet such an honest person, so can I make a few more requests on this basis? Dylan arrived unexpectedly fast, and soon a Rolls-Royce stopped in front of me. The car window was rolled down, revealing half of Dylan's noble and abstinent face. His thin lips were slightly pursed, revealing a sense of coldness and world weariness. He didn't look at me, but just said to the headset, "Yes, withdraw the wanted order. I have already found the person." I was still working and I didn't want to stand on the side of the road awkwardly, so I had to get in the car first. At this point I have confirmed that he is the other father of my child. Because, from the moment he appeared, I smelled pheromones from him that were 100% compatible with me. 03. Maybe the alpha next to me consciously released a large amount of soothing pheromones, which alleviated my discomfort a lot. As for Dylan, as soon as I got in the car, he closed his eyes and rested, and had no intention of talking to me at all. I couldn't hold it back any longer and complained quietly. "Why don't you take responsibility for me and my cub?" Dylan opened his eyes and looked at me. "What?" I get angry when I talk about this. Although I don't know what happened between him and I during the period of amnesia, I hate the alpha who just pulls up his pants and leaves after having fun, without caring about anything left behind. This is your child after all, you really just leave him alone. Dylan hesitated. "Are you pregnant?" Wow, this guy didn't hear what I said on the phone? Why did he come so quickly? Seeing me slap the pregnancy test report on his face in an accusing manner, Dylan looked stunned, and it took him a long while to come back to his senses. "You stay with me, I will take care of it." Dylan speaks like an older daddy, gentle and polite. This naturally made me let down my guard. "Dylan, I can go to your place to give birth to the baby, but before that, I want to make 3 rules with you. First, you have to provide me with a fixed amount of alpha pheromones on time every day. This is for your cub. Second, I'm not used to living with others. You cannot bring other omegas home before I leave. Third, you must guarantee my absolute freedom before and after pregnancy. I can eat whatever I want and do whatever I want. After the cub is born, whether I stay or leave is all up to me." The conditions I proposed were harsh. Dylan crossed his legs, thought about it, and quickly agreed. "Anything else? Are you really that easy to talk to?" I glanced at him. "Not yet, not anymore." Dylan raised his hand and beckoned me. "Come here." I just moved a little closer and he picked me up, and I fell into his arms. Before I could say anything, Dylan suddenly lowered his head and bit the gland exposed on the back of my neck. His scarlet and forbearing eyes were completely different from the gentle Dylan before. I was so scared that I lost my voice. "Dylan?" He didn't bite deeply and let me go quickly. "Sorry, I lost control. The mark on you has faded and I don't like it." Dylan grabbed my wrist and said, "It won't happen again." For an omega who has already been marked for life, a second marking is not painful, but rather a way to increase interest. It seems that this is just an alpha's reasonable sexual need. If I get angry about this and bully an honest, it would be too inhumane. I bit my lower lip and said generously, "It's okay, just a bite, I'm not that squeamish." Let's put this little episode aside. Dylan is really a qualified alpha partner. He would come to my room every day and release soothing pheromones in person. Learn from the doctor how to take care of the omega during pregnancy. He took some time off from work to take me out to play and relax. Although I heard from the doctor that Dylan has severe bipolar disorder. But he really did as he said, he never lost control in front of me again. I was a little guilty about how nice he was to me. But then I thought, I'm pregnant with his baby, so it's only natural for him to be nice to me. What's more, even he himself said, "You are pregnant with my baby, so you can have whatever you want." Dylan was working in the study. I ran to find him, only to find that he was connected to a remote conference call. He hung up the meeting and naturally took me into his lap. The action was skillful as if it had been done countless times. "What's wrong?" I complained to him as a matter of course. "Your kid is bothering me." Dylan has an unusually good temper and he releases pheromones. He rubbed my abdomen and asked me softly, "Does it still hurt?" I hummed lazily in his arms. "Dylan, why are you so nice to me? You've almost turned me into a canary. I can't live without you anymore." The voice of the alpha behind him is gentler than his pheromones and can make people fall in love with him. "Then stay here forever, okay?" After hearing what he said, I remained silent. The word forever is still too long for me. I just used my son to get free food and drink at the Bow family. From the beginning, I had no intention of occupying Dylan's life. I thought a lot at once. Because during pregnancy, women are not very sensitive to pheromones. I didn't notice at all that just because I didn't answer his question in time, the gaze of the person behind me became darker and deeper. The alpha pheromones that permeate the air are so dense that water could drip out and can almost engulf a person. 05. The servant spilled the milk I usually drink and was frightened for a moment. "Ma'am, I didn't mean it. It was just a glass of milk," so I was very easy to talk to and let her go. Dylan is busy with work and hasn't been back for several days. At night, I had a dream. In the dream, there was a man whose face I couldn't see clearly holding my waist. His breath hit my glands that were bitten roughly and rotten. He kissed the flower tattoo on the side of my waist in a morbid and devout manner. I was like a broken toy and could only listen to that person murmuring, "I love you," over and over again with tears in my eyes. I was so scared that I broke out in a cold sweat and woke up from my dream. There was no one around me, only the red dot camera on the wall was flashing, as if conveying some message. I curled myself up in the quilt, which still smelled of Dylan's alpha pheromones, but still couldn't make me feel at ease. While I was half asleep, it seemed as if a large hand touched my face. The surrounding temperature also seemed to be rising gradually. I rubbed my face in his hands unconsciously, smelling the familiar scent, and fell asleep with a frown. 06. When I got up, I found an ambiguous red mark on my neck. It doesn't look like a mosquito bite, it looks more like... I subconsciously covered it with my shirt. I don't know why, but I felt guilty and thought that I couldn't let Dylan see this. During breakfast, I still didn't see Dylan, but I saw many doctors coming in and out. I called a doctor and asked him about it. Dylan didn't go to work at all these days. Because he was in a susceptible period and had a bipolar disorder, he could only lock himself in the room and wear a bite control device. When I saw Dylan from a distance, I was shocked by his miserable appearance. His fair arms were covered in bite marks, and because he was wearing a bite control device, he could only tilt his head back most of the time, with his Adam's apple rolling in pain. For no reason, I felt a surge of heartache in my heart. Dylan. He is a patient with bipolar disorder and needs a lot of warm emotions to heal. I am also a patient with emotional disorders. No matter how much and how passionate my emotions are, I cannot feel the love of others. Two people in winter can't help but keep each other warm. Ignoring the doctor's objection, I walked up to him and emitted a little bit of omega pheromone, but this amount of pheromone was undoubtedly a drop in the bucket for Dylan. He gritted his teeth in pain and tried to shoo me away. "Don't stay here, get out, I'll hurt you." Dylan's self-control as an alpha is not very good, but when the omega he marked stands here, he can bite the bite stop and make it shake left and right, making a fierce sound of metal twisting. I'm not a nosy person, but I don't want anything to happen to Dylan. I'm still counting on him to raise my cubs in the future. I stood on tiptoes and tried to kiss his lips through the bite stopper. "Your body says it wants me to stay, right?" Dylan's breathing suddenly hitched for a moment. He lowered his cold eyes and held my waist with one hand as I was almost unable to stand. "It wants to." He held my hand and guided me to press on the heavy area on his lower abdomen. "It wants you to help me here, even with your hands." Dylan's size was too big for my hands to hold. He chuckled and whispered in my ear, "2 hands." The tips of my ears suddenly turned red. "I won't help you anymore." I turned around and tried to leave, but I didn't have the chance. He bit my lips almost impatiently and turned me to the ground. My body was firmly controlled by him, and I suddenly panicked. "Dylan, the child is still here, you can't?" At this moment, Dylan looked like a madman who was tired of the world, with his eyes lowered in a daze. The voice was almost a sigh as he said, "So what a hassle." He bit the back of my neck, and his calloused fingertips rested on my abdomen as if naturally. The calm voice naturally revealed an extremely world-weary tone. "Then let him die." Dylan's voice was extremely unclear and I couldn't hear what he was saying for a moment. I could only support his body, which was too strong for me. "Dylan, what did you say?" Dylan didn't answer me immediately, nor did he move. He just sniffed the back of my neck. It took a long time until the dark red in the eyes slowly faded away. "Nothing," he said apologetically and kissed away the tears that were caused by fear. I said, "I'll be careful with the kids around." 07. Alphas are just too bad. He took advantage of my little bit of heartache and made me feel weak all over. Dylan's sensitive period really bullied me, and it took me a long time to coax me into peace. But he could coax the older ones but was helpless with the younger ones. I sat on his sofa, holding his kid in my arms and giving him orders. Dylan, your kid wants to eat tofu pudding from the south of the city, with onions and ginger, but no soy sauce. You want some roast duck from the north of the city? I want half a duck with less oil. You want some male models? Ugh, you want some milk tea. Dylan never complained about any trouble, and he would do everything I asked him to do personally. The servant also secretly gave me some advice, asking me to keep Dylan longer. After all, with Dylan's identity, it is too easy for him to find a young and beautiful Omega of equal status. But what they didn't know was that I just wanted to find Dylan to pick up a kid and then do whatever I wanted. Dylan and I are not from the same world, and the truth is that I am taking advantage of him now. Unexpectedly, just a few days later, it turned out to be just as the servant said. Dylan came home with a little lipstick on his sleeve. Before I could ask, Dylan took the initiative to report to me. It was a married Omega who accidentally bumped into my hand. Why explain this to me? I yawned lazily in his arms heartlessly. I had no interest in what he said until I heard Dylan say, "I'm sorry for not considering your feelings. If there's anything you want." I immediately raised my starry eyes and looked at him expectantly. Really? I was playing a shooting game on your computer a few days ago and it was a little laggy. Can I get a better graphics card now? Dylan is always available to me on these matters. But his only request was that the fully transparent glass in the bathroom could not be removed. She said she was afraid that I would slip while taking a bath and hurt the noble little prince in her belly. After a long time, I am not sure whether it will hurt or not. But when I came out of the bathroom, Dylan's lower body always greets me politely. Really so polite. What is completely different from the scenery below is the gentlemanly and decadent outfit on someone's upper body. The pajamas Dylan was wearing were a very loose style. She casually unbuttoned a few buttons, revealing her extremely sexy collarbone with a few drops of water flowing through it. But that person seemed to be completely unaware. Seeing that I didn't say anything, he laughed. Why? The kid isn't bothering you today. Do you need me to massage you? Maybe it was because his eyes were too sincere. I couldn't tell for a moment whether this person was truly innocent or just pretending to be innocent. He was staring at me, and I walked quickly to his side in shame and got on the bed. He buried himself in the quilt, and his face under the quilt was so red that blood seemed to be dripping out. Then he leaned forward to look at him again and turned over the book in his hand. Dylan came closer and I was covered in the alpha's huge shadow. His knuckles naturally pressed against my abdomen, releasing the alpha's soothing pheromones as usual. But after a long time, he still showed no intention of leaving. Dylan. I called him, but he didn't answer. I turned over and looked at him. Unexpectedly, I saw that Dylan had already fallen asleep. Beneath the lazy and unfocused brows was the slightly rising and falling breathing. He just fell asleep like that? I took off his glasses and was caught off guard by his handsome, slightly frowned eyes. Although before that, I tried to remind myself over and over again. This person is so nice to me just for the sake of my son. And I stayed with him only for the sake of my cub. But now, I suddenly want to know. What was the relationship between Dylan and I like before? Dylan, I traced his lips and thought. I guess Dylan has spoiled me, and my thoughts are a little off. I am probably a very bad Omega who doesn't want to take responsibility but wants to do bad things after dark. I stared at his neck, which was so white that it was almost transparent, for a long time. Then he lowered his head and bit it, leaving a very shallow, slightly astringent bite mark. At this moment, the right to mark this alpha is mine. 08. Maybe it's because he feels guilty. The next morning, there were no bite marks on Dylan's body. Instead, I have a lot of strange red marks on my body. It can't be wiped off with a cotton swab, and it can't be covered with clothes. But fortunately, Dylan didn't say anything and believed me when I said there were too many mosquitoes. Before I got sleepy and wanted to go to sleep, he asked me to lift up my clothes and he wiped it for me. When I woke up, Dylan was gone. Only the cool scent of alpha pheromones permeated the air. The servant brought me another glass of milk. While I was drinking, I asked the servant casually, "Do you know what the relationship between me and Dylan was like before?" The servant looked at me with a smile in his eyes. You have always been Dylan's Omega. I lowered my eyes, and my fingers on the milk cup unconsciously rubbed the wall of the cup. Then why am I in the slums? The servant's answer was perfect. Someone kidnapped you and left you there. Afraid that I wouldn't believe it, the servant added, although you were just Mr. S. lover before, you and Mr. were very affectionate. Madam, you don't still think that the master only likes children, do you? Since I have no memory of it, I don't know whether it is reasonable or not. Just hearing him say that, I suddenly lost my voice. Are Dylan and I really in love? What if it's just because I lost my memory? How sad he must be since she's been avoiding him even when she's pregnant. What are you talking about? I saw Dylan coming in from outside with a big bag of soup in his hand. Tofu pudding in the south, roast duck in the north. If you want anything else to eat, I'll ask the chef to make it. Dylan had just put down the soup. I threw myself on him and kissed his slightly cold lips. Dylan's body, which was standing straight, suddenly stiffened and he hugged me subconsciously. What's wrong? Who bullied you? I buried myself in his neck, sniffing his pheromones greedily. I just suddenly can't bear to hand you over to another Omega. Dylan's eyes darkened slightly, and he held my hand and pressed it against his abs, his voice hoarse. Don't give it to anyone else. I'm yours. He put me down carefully and got me a blanket. As I watched his back walk away, I turned around and saw a blooming flower outside the window. There was a period of time during my pregnancy when I was extremely obsessed with eating dirt. Dylan wanted to stop me from eating these weird things. He found some tools for digging the soil and taught me how to plant flowers to pass the time. I don't know when these flowers will bloom. I lowered my eyes and gently stroked my belly. The baby, who was several months old, had already started to move and was trying hard to respond to my movements. I murmured softly, my tone unconsciously softening. Baby, Daddy seems to know what it feels like to like someone. 09. I started searching online for information about bipolar disorder. You don't know until you check, and you're speechless once you check. Are entries so lazy now? Consider Dylan himself as the reference standard for the term bipolar disorder. But at least I didn't write nothing. I was recording everything bit by bit and didn't even notice it was getting dark. Until the maid told me that Dylan was back. I almost ran downstairs and threw myself into his arms. Dylan looked tired after work. But he still held my waist at the first moment. Be careful. Look. He looked in the direction my finger was pointing. Beautiful fireworks rose one after another in the night sky. The light illuminated half the sky, and I looked at him with a smile on my face. Do you like the gift I gave you? I like it very much. Dylan said hoarsely and kissed my forehead. It's been a long time since anyone gave me a gift. The fireworks that day were particularly beautiful. When Dylan was lost in thought while looking at the fireworks, I whispered beside him, Dylan, I really like you. This kind of liking has nothing to do with pheromones or the cub. I just simply like you. Maybe the wind here is too strong and it drowned out my voice. Dylan didn't answer. I felt a little lost for a moment, but then I thought it didn't matter. In the future, I will tell him, I like you, many times, and he can hear it. I couldn't help but stick my head out from my warm cotton coat. She secretly gave him a kiss on the face. Before she could pull back, Dylan held her head and kissed her back. I groaned twice, but my struggles were in vain. I could only be forced to look up and meet his red eyes. He was in complete control of my breathing during the kiss. The only thing I could do was helplessly hug his waist as a support for my body. At the end of the lovemaking, I heard Dylan whisper in my ear. You said you liked me? Don't leave me or I'm afraid I'll go crazy in the end. It was too boring to be alone in Dylan's house while pregnant. I called the owner of the boxing gym and wanted to go watch the match. Not used to being served, I went to the boxing gym by myself. The owner of the boxing gym stared at my stomach and silently put out the cigarette in his hand. After a long silence, he finally uttered the first sentence with difficulty. Is it really okay to watch such a bloody scene while pregnant? What's the big deal? I even went to the boxing ring when I was pregnant. But I didn't dare say it. After saying this, I was afraid that I would be blocked on the spot by the owner of the boxing gym. Soon, the boxing gym owner uttered the second sentence. Where's your alpha? Doesn't he care about you? I rolled my eyes and said calmly, I sneaked out. If my alpha knew I came to this place, he would definitely be angry. It's true, Dylan allows me to go to all kinds of places. But one prerequisite is that he leads the team, and the other prerequisite is that there are not so many muscular men. The gym owner was confused and said, You're pregnant with his child, what are you afraid of? Perhaps because I was overthinking during pregnancy, I lowered my head. But he doesn't seem to like this kid very much. I could feel that Dylan was listening to the doctor's instructions. When I write down my Omega pregnancy notes, I am usually absent-minded. But he always responds to my requests and only rarely cares about the kid. It was hard for me to understand what he was thinking. I raised my eyes and took a look at the situation on the boxing ring. He fiddled with the chips and seemed to have lost again. Sure enough, I am still not suitable for making money. It is better to be a laborer, or just lie down and wait for the money to come to you. It seemed like things were getting lively at the other end of the door, and the crowd watching consciously made way for it. Someone even shouted excitedly, Dylan! The first thing I saw was Dylan walking in wearing a tight gray and black windbreaker. The straight clothes outlined his sexy and smooth waist, and the velvet gloves on his hands showed that he had just come out of a command room. The badge on his shoulder sparkled brightly in the dark color of the boxing gym late at night. This person's natural aura can be seen at a glance no matter where he is. He walked in front of me and lowered his eyes without any emotion. Everyone in the boxing gym looked sideways to see who had offended this popular Beijing boss. Feeling guilty, I quickly stood on tiptoe and kissed Dylan's lips. He didn't move, not even giving me his usual hug. I sensed that he might be angry. He quickly pulled the awkward boy in front of the owner of the boxing gym. Let me introduce you, this is my boyfriend. Dylan still didn't speak. I could only pull his clothes and try to explain to him. I just came out to relax, really, I'm not lying to you. The more I spoke, the more anxious I became. When I still wanted to say something, Dylan's fingers had already pushed the hand away from my abdomen. I slowly lowered my eyes and gently teased the little cub in my belly with my fingers. Why are you in such a hurry? I believe everything you say. I looked at Dylan's hands behind his back, and it seemed he was holding something silver. I leaned over curiously to see, what is this? Could it be a ring? But with Dylan's EQ, could he have thought of this? Seeing me tilt my head, he looked at him suspiciously. Dylan finally took action, raising his hands to cover my eyes. He threw the silver object to the subordinates beside him. It's nothing, don't look at it. This one isn't strong enough, I'll give you a better one next time. 11. Since that day, it seemed like Dylan was hiding something from me. He seemed to be doing something important, leaving early and coming back late. Maybe I was just overthinking during my pregnancy. But I couldn't help but rummage through his desk while he was not at home. His desk at home is very tidy, with only a few documents on it. Just when I had nothing to gain and was about to leave, I saw a small safe next to his desk. I have seen this safe. He came to the gym to see me that day. Just put the silver thing into this safe. I fiddled with the safe curiously. Tried several key information of Dylan, but none of them were correct. Not a birthday, not a phone number, and not an initial. What could that be? I remembered what I had asked the maid about before, the day when Dylan and I first met. My hands typed the information faster than my brain, and the password box opened with a click. I curled my lips in delight. I knew Dylan didn't expect me to be that smart. My fingers stopped in midair. At this moment, I saw the sterling silver chain in the safe. All of a sudden, all the past events reappeared before my eyes. This sterling silver chain is familiar to me and was tailor-made for me. It has wrapped around my ankles countless times. I saw a Dylan that was completely different from what I knew. I thought of the Dylan who clung to me till death, the Dylan who had lost control and gone mad, the Dylan who could only bite my glands in the dark, the Dylan who gently said, "I love you," over and over again, but who refused to stop even when I was crying until I was incontinent. He was obsessed with using my body until it was broken, and then using the most precious medicinal herbs to restore it. Is this love? I know I don't understand love. They have no say in what love is. But if this is really love, then why does he lie to me again and again? In a trance, the pure silver chain fell to the ground with a crisp sound. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to look at Dylan and caught a flash of panic in his eyes, which were always calm and composed. I bit my lip to protect my slightly swollen belly. Dylan, let me go. Dylan didn't say anything, just stared at me. The atmosphere was tense, but probably because Dylan backed down. I didn't even feel any overly strong aura. I clenched my fingers nervously and mustered my courage. Dylan, even if you tie me up, you can still take me and the baby by force. I still won't love you, never. After saying this, I almost broke out in a cold sweat. I was sure Dylan would just tie me up or put me in a room full of red dot cameras. In my past memories, it was a nightmare that was enough to devour me. But what I didn't expect was that Dylan just turned aside and said, "Go away." He just let me go. I didn't have any regrets and just walked out. As I passed by him, I smelled the bitter smell of medicine on him. Is he sick now? I am probably a very mean person. Even though I am also covered in bruises, I can't help thinking about him. I could only comfort myself by saying that he said this for the sake of the child. I heard him murmur, "I just want the best for you." Without stopping, I slammed the door shut. I didn't go back to the ghetto, but I had nowhere else to go. I had to stay at the home of a good friend of mine while I was pregnant. No one loved me when I was born, so I don't know what love is. Later, she suffered from emotional deficiency and followed Dylan, a cold-hearted man, and she no longer understood what love was. I originally thought that after the baby was born, he would have two fathers to love him, and he probably wouldn't have to follow my old path. But now this idea has become a luxury as Dylan and I have broken up. My good friend stroked my messy hair with concern. "My poor baby, so you failed in your escape and were caught by that paranoid lunatic?" I buried myself in the quilt and nodded helplessly. For many days afterwards, I deliberately avoided any topics related to Dylan. But in fact, there was no Dylan-related topic in the news. On the third day, I finally called Dylan. It was the doctor beside him who answered the phone. I was confused and only heard the doctor beside him say, "You have to know how difficult it is for a patient like Dylan, who has severe bipolar disorder, to use radical treatment to treat his bipolar disorder for fear of hurting his lover, while at the same time guiding a lover who has been deprived of emotion since childhood to recognize his love." The doctor on the other end of the phone said kindly, "Madam, your emotional deficiency was cured during the last pregnancy checkup. All your emotions now are your own thoughts, and you can make your own choices." It turns out that I am not someone abandoned by the whole world. There has always been a person who is obviously not good at all. But you tried to teach me how to love. At that time, a heartless piece of wood would only be afraid. Now this barren desert has grown flesh and blood and blossomed into a flower. Not only is there fear, there is now something more. I felt more helpless than ever before. My heart ached so much. If I had known love would be so painful. Then I still don't want to know what love is. I might as well be a prisoner canary fool. 3 days later, I met Dylan again. He didn't see me, but just signed the treatment form numbly again. I rushed over and dropped his pen. While Dylan was looking at me in astonishment, I looked down and saw the dense needle holes on his arm. The doctor suggested conservative treatment to him many times, but he never listened. He said he was eager to show his best to his own lover. "Dylan, you're crazy." My tears suddenly welled up. How could someone be so mean? They did it on purpose to make me sad. Dylan panicked for a moment and came to wipe my tears. "Don't cry, I'm an alpha, I'm not afraid of pain, not at all." He held me in his arms, releasing pheromones and soothing me with words. "I know, even if you don't love me, I still want to love you as much as I can. I'm a person who's been crazy once, and I don't want to hurt you this time, well." Before Dylan could finish his words, I bit his lips viciously. He bit very deeply, wishing he could kiss this bad alpha until he would be speechless for the rest of his life. I'm not very good at saying sweet words, but I want Dylan to know that. The people he likes have many, very passionate emotions, and will also like him. After the kiss, I gasped and said fiercely, "You are mine." I won't leave and let other Omegas take advantage of you. This is also what Dylan taught me. Liking something means patience and possession. It is a unique tenderness that only belongs to that person. Someone rushed in from outside and reported to Dylan breathlessly. Dylan is in trouble. He doesn't want to see the young lady. See? I just raised my head and uttered a syllable, "What?" Dylan had already intertwined their fingers and kissed back. You can't escape from my grasp anyway. 15. I stayed with Dylan until his bipolar disorder temporarily subsided. A few days after he was discharged from the hospital, his little cub and I came into this world. According to the results of the test, he will be a male Omega who looks very similar to me in the future. He will meet an alpha who will love him all his life and will be happier than me. It's just that the alpha who married him. I took a look at his alpha father, who seemed cool on the surface but was actually so unreliable that he had hit his head against the wall many times, and thought silently that the alpha's days might not be so good anymore. After I finished feeding the baby at home, I noticed that Dylan had been standing there for a long time. An alpha in his susceptible period can actually pretend to be a gentleman. After the servant took the kid away, he lay stiffly beside me. I took a deep breath and poked him. Dylan didn't move. Really no response? No way? Could it be that while treating bipolar disorder, Dylan actually became impotent? Dylan said in a low voice, still trying to comfort me, "If you are afraid, I will not touch you." I was angry, pressed Dylan under me, held his hand and lifted my clothes. "Dylan, can't you see that I'm seducing you?" Dylan's breath stopped after discovering the new world. In the second half of the night, with a red face, I kicked an overly demanding alpha off the bed. But it was like there was some kind of glue and I couldn't push it off. "Ugh, Dylan, fuck you big asshole. You shouldn't let someone eat meat. Once you let him eat meat, he will take advantage of it. There absolutely won't be a next time."